FDA Monthly World Democracy Discussion. I am Stephen Garvey, Executive Director of the Foundation for Democratic Advancement. Today I will interview Solomon Commissiong on the upcoming U.S. presidential election on November 6, 2012. Solomon is an American educator, author, human rights activist, community and youth advocate, and Executive Director of Your World News Media Collective. Solomon is author of 4 books, including his most recent, A Hip-Hop Activist Speaks Out on Social Issues. Welcome, Solomon, to this program.
Thank you. It's an honor to be on your program. Appreciate the invite.
Yeah. You mentioned community activism. What does that entail?
Well, it means getting involved in my definition, it means getting involved in the politics of your community on a grassroots level. And I measure politics as not Democrat or Republican or independent. That's kind of the limited way that the American, powers that be want most Americans to see politics as, through a very limited prism. They want most Americans to see the height of their political expression to be limited to simply the ballot box. And so, I see politics as everything somebody can or cannot do within their communities. And so, it's incumbent upon us to get involved and to shape the politics, not necessarily ballot box politics, but things like getting involved, shaping the agenda for the school board, making sure that, especially if you come from a community that is predominantly black and brown, making sure that gentrification is kept at bay, making sure that the politics that allow so many black and brown people year after year to be gunned down by the police unarmed, for that to be reshaped in a way that it's not happening anymore. Period. So that's kind of the way I see politics is that and some of these institutions have to be deconstructed to be reconstructed, such as the way that we look at policing in America. It's a very apartheid-like police system in America that really has a disproportionate negative impact on people of color, and we've seen no shortage of that in 2012, where a recent report was just put out by Malcolm X grassroots movement that shows that every 36 hours in America this year, from January 1st to right now, every 36 hours a black person is killed by the police or so-called law enforcement in America.
Right, interesting. And you're residing just outside of Washington, D.C., is that correct?
Yes, in Maryland, about 5 minutes outside of Washington, D.C.
So does your community activism encompass Washington, D.C. as well?
Yeah, very much so, very much so. Very, very much so. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I started, Your World News, for it to really touch the Washington, D.C. metropolitan area. Those of us that live in D.C. or Maryland or Northern Virginia, it's known as the DMV. So we all kind of consider ourselves one. There's very little distinction between, living in Suitland, Maryland, and living in Southeast D.C. So we see it. That's why it's called the DMV, standing for D.C., Maryland, and Virginia. When I started Your World News Media Collective, it was to not just provide a local voice and outlet for issues that were not being covered by the so-called corporate news, but also to address and to cover and provide critical analysis and commentary to geopolitical issues and topics that were going on worldwide, and how Western forces and governments such as the U.S., how they play an oftentimes negative role within these issues, and what we can do, because as you know, Stephen, and I think that's one of the the reasons why you and your partner started your organization, is that if people are uninformed about policies and issues, it makes it that much more difficult for community activists and civil rights activists and so forth. It really makes it that much more difficult for folks to be mobilized. People have to be engaged and be educated on a number of issues before you can really truly mobilize them in ways that can really invoke a really strong, tangible outcome.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Two sides to that, right?
Right.
It's not just
Right.
activating, but also informing, as you're saying, and they both feed off
Definitely.
each other. Interesting. Does working in the Washington area, how does that impact what you're doing versus being in another city?
Yeah, I think that being in Washington D.C., it impacts it greatly because it's the belly of the beast, so to speak. I mean,
Mhm.
you're right here within the belly of the most powerful empire in the world, and so laws and policies are shaped literally 10, 15 minutes from where I'm sitting right now, and and so there's always, and because it's Washington D.C., there's always some kind of event that is always a kind of a stone's throw away from myself. So it's if it's happening, it's happening in D.C. If there's something of substance happening, more times than not, it's going to happen in D.C. It's going to it's going to find its way to D.C. And it is it's the political capital of America, the electoral
Mhm.
political capital of America. So there's so much so much going on, and also there's so many protests and a lot of also activist groups and organizations that are on the same on the same page. So it provides a lot of opportunities for individuals and folks in other organizations to link up akimbo to join forces, if you will, and to really pool their resources for the greater good.
Yeah, it sounds very rewarding, and probably enlightening as well. Your most recent book, it mentions hip hop activism. What does that mean? What is a
Well,
hip hop activist?
thank you for that question.
Yeah.
My most recent book, which I mean, I'm proud of all my books, but this one really I would say is perhaps the most important work that I've done so far, because it was just very labor intensive, and it provides just myriad social commentary and alternative history that is kept outside of the mainstream margins. It's called A Hip Hop Activist Speaks Out on Social Issues, and oftentimes someone looks at it and thinks that maybe it's predominantly on hip hop, but I consider myself a hip hop activist because I was raised within the golden era of hip hop, and that's a time when hip hop was not negatively impacted by large corporations, and so these large corporations didn't really at the time see a lot of merit in terms of investing millions and millions of dollars into hip hop, and so college radio station airwaves and local radio station airwaves were filled with hip hop artists that were talking about a lot of or given a lot of social commentary, talking about a lot of different history and so forth. And so you got the information unfettered. So you got
Right.
public KRS-One, and so they gave you political commentary. We were getting, and especially being a black youth in America, you were getting commentary that was kept off of CNN, NBC, ABC, CBS, and so forth, and so it really shaped who I was, as well as legions of other kids around the country that were listening to the same music that I was, and it was
Mhm.
presenting us with ideas and sparking thoughts and conversation about things that we simply weren't getting in school or elsewhere, and it was also providing us with narratives on history that was kept out of the history books, kept out of the classrooms, and so it fomented the activists that you're on the phone with today, and it played a major role, and it got me interested in activism. It got me interested in a range of issues that, quite frankly, are devoid from mainstream corporate-backed hip-hop now. There's a lot of that hip-hop that is being rapped about and sung about today, but it's not played anywhere on corporate airwaves or whether it's radio or television inside the U.S. empire.
How do you define hip hop? What do you mean by that term? Because people have different meanings of that term. How would you define that?
When I look at hip hop, I'm looking at the entire culture. I'm looking at the various elements that comprise hip hop. I'm talking about MCing, b-boying, DJing, graffiti art, and also probably my favorite, the most important element of hip hop which is knowledge of self, knowledge of community.
Mhm.
And so, I'm looking at hip hop as a culture, because within
Mm.
hip hop culture, you have rap music,
Right.
which is something that you do within hip hop, hip hop culture. But it's not it's certainly not hip hop culture altogether, because if you think that way, then you're leaving out the b-boys and b-girls and the
Mhm.
graffiti artists and so
Oh,
forth, you know.
okay.
So
Yeah,
yeah, so
interesting.
to me that's what hip hop culture is.
So this is avenue for expression for a lot of let's say youth and different sorts of people to express how they're feeling, what they think about things. It's almost an under culture or something.
Subculture.
Yeah, yeah, subculture. Just something outside of the mainstream.
Yeah, very much. Yeah,
Yeah.
you hit it. The expression, the political expression, because to me hip hop, invokes the height of political expression for youth in America, especially youth of color, blacks, Latinos.
Right.
It to me it's the height of it. And so what we see on TV, on BET, MTV, VH1, they're all owned by Viacom, that large corporation that controls it. So what we see on those on airwaves like the Viacom networks, the Clear channels, and so forth. The Clear channel being the largest radio corporation in America. That's kind of the Frankenstein version that they created. The Frankenstein version that really they were able to create these cookie cutter shapes and say, hey, if you want to be played on the radio, if you want to be played on our airwaves, then you better be talking about issues, or you better sound like this rap group or that rap group, and they can point to a couple rap groups here and there, and usually it's narratives that are very stereotypically racist. They're very misogynistic, sexist, and by and large, these are the kind of acts that are pretty much only signed by the major record labels. So if you're not talking about those kind of things, you're not going to get signed. And so that's where when I was growing up, Stephen, there was no term called underground rap. There was no term called underground hip hop. But now there is, because just like the Underground Railroad that Harriet Tubman created with others, it literally wasn't underground, but it's a term given to denote that the dominant hegemonic society at that time was pushing it under. And so with hip hop right now, the dominant hegemony that this oligarchy of this media oligarchy that we have in America is pushing down these alternative voices, these voices that should be given airspace, should be given their own equal space, I should say, equal space to express themselves. But they're pushed under, and they say, hey, if you're going to talk about anti-war topics, if you're going to talk about institutional racism in America, if you're going to talk about this, you're not going to get played. You're not going to get played. And so those that continue to really keep it honest with themselves and continue to talk about those narratives, they're not heard on the mainstream, and so therefore it's called underground. This is underground rap. So Immortal Technique, a Brother Ali, that would be considered underground hip hop. Dead Prez, that's underground hip hop, because it's not being played, and it's not being played on the mainstream airways, whether that's radio or television.
Interesting. I'm wondering about the purpose and mission of Your World News Media Collective. Could you touch on that?
The purpose for Your World News is to provide, and we know we're not, unfortunately, we understand that Your World News is a tiny cog in a greater wheel that we want to be a part of, that can really provide news and commentary and information that should be on the mainstream airwaves, but is purposely not. And so what we wanted to do was to throw our hat in the ring and to contribute to that. So even though we may only get, when we do a radio broadcast, we may only get, and I say only because some folks will say, oh, that's pretty good, but we'll get maybe 3,500 to 4,000 listens a week, which is, to me, is pretty decent, because that's 3,500, 4,000 people that perhaps did not know a certain issue before they had heard our broadcast. And we also have, a literary blog where authors such as like Stephen Lindman and Obi Egbuna, write, news and information and commentary that is posted there. So, our role was to provide those narratives and also to provide an uncompromising, African perspective to a lot of these definitions. So even though we have authors that contribute that are European American like Stephen Lindman, we are a black founded news outlet, a media collective, and we try to make sure that we always represent the interests of our community, and we're very proud of that.
Excellent. I'm going to shift to the upcoming U.S. presidential election. Is there any hope Americans can drive out of this election coming up with the two main candidates, Romney and Obama?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
No, not at all. I'm glad you asked that. Absolutely zero, zilch. And Stephen, it's probably something that you and your friends and compatriots in Canada probably have these conversations. You probably look at America in a very kind of like euphoric way. Like, is this really happening? Is this really happening? Does this, are these people really that dumbed down? And I say that because I have some friends in Canada, and for instance, in 2010, 2009, 2010, they would say, like, why are people in America? They would ask me a question: why are people in America so easily arguing against their own interests? Like this whole healthcare thing. Like, we have universal health care here in Canada, and they have it in all these other industrialized countries throughout the world. Why in America? Why is there such a debate? Why are there actually Americans that are actively arguing, for the interests of these large health insurance corporations and pharmaceuticals? Why is that? And I used to tell my friends all the time that are in Canada, well, it's simple. Well, Americans have been dumbed down, and the ruling class controls the media, and therefore they control the interests. And Americans from elementary school all the way through college, they're given stuff in a very limited prism. The vast majority of them are given things in a very limited prism. And so critical thinking is not even an afterthought in most Americans. They take what's given to them, they imbibe it. There's no heavy critical analysis. They don't understand the authors of the information in which they're getting the news information, and so therefore they don't understand that these folks that are giving them this limited information, they don't even understand it's limited, but they're not even questioning the fact that their motives are with the so-called 1% as well. And so it's with Mitt Romney and Obama, it's kind of like Obama and McCain, and so yes, the Republicans. It's kind of like when you look at Fox News here. Like when people look at Fox News, like, oh my gosh, that's so right wing, Stephen. Like, oh my gosh. And then, when you have such like a limited perspective on things, then that means that you look at MSNBC as being a clear alternative to Fox News. So Fox News is out and open. Yes, they come as they say, this is who we are, all right, and this is the news and information, and we're going to present our propaganda from this perspective and so forth, and we're even going to label it as fair and balanced. And so when folks start to look at MSNBC, they start to look at it as like, wow, this is a clear alternative, when really there's not, MSNBC, yes, maybe liberal, but they're more centrist than anything. They're not to the left of any spectrum. They bang the same war drums that Fox News bangs. So they demand, they'll have commentators, just like the war in Libya. You had Rachel Maddow and Ed Schultz, and they were championing the war in Libya just as they were on Fox News, just as they were on CNN. And so, with this whole, and so they put out, and so they have as much blood on their hands as the U.S. government and the Pentagon and the State Department, in my estimation, because they shape the narratives, and they know when they put out a limited perspective on certain things, whether it's candidates or in this case with war and imperialism, they know that they're shaping the minds of tens and tens of millions of obsequious individuals who are going to either, champion these wars, or if you present it in a broad way, then they may ask for more from their government, and they may demand and into these wars that would undoubtedly save not just American lives, but hundreds and hundreds of thousands of civilians' lives in other places like Iraq and Afghanistan. So when we're presented with Romney and Obama, just like McCain, I'm like, what I ask people, what seismic difference have you seen with President Barack Obama that you claim that you wouldn't have seen with John McCain? Obama expanded the war in Afghanistan. He said he was going to close Gitmo. Gitmo continues to be open. He signed the NDAA, which is the National Defense Authorization Act, on December 31st of 2011, which makes the Patriot Act look like Pee Wee Herman, where they can just extrajudiciously kill Americans wherever they are in the world. They can go into your house, Stephen. If you're a journalist in America, they can take you out and they can imprison you, saying, oh, this interview that you gave with so and so years ago, they can do it. They can imprison you with no trial for as long as they want. And Obama signed that. If that was Bush, Stephen, we know what happened when Bush put forth the Patriot Act. You have all these liberals, regardless of what color it was, they were out in the streets protesting, bring home the troops, this, that, and the other. Patriot Act is wrong. With Obama, it's silence. And you have all these Obamites, these Obama supporters that just remained completely silent. Silence. And you say, well, this is what Obama has done. This is what he's done. He's expanded in Afghanistan. He started a war in Libya, bombed there. He signed the NDAA. He got in bed with the healthcare insurance corporations. This law, this Affordable Act law, he received over $30 million, in his first campaign from them, and this was his gift to them, and then you tell them that bill, 2/3 of it were written by health insurance lobbyists, and so and it benefits Cigna and Blue Cross Blue Shield and United. It benefits those health insurance corporations far more than it does the people, and then it's not going to kick in until 2014, 2015, and when it does kick in, Stephen, it will still leave 17 to 20 million Americans off the ledger of being insured, and we know that to this day, every year, 40 to 44,000 Americans each year die simply because they have no access to health insurance. And you tell this to them, and they just look like a deer in headlights. And then the first thing they do, visceral thing, is to defend him, defend Obama, defend the Democratic Party, and say, oh man, well, we got to vote for him because, well, we can't let Mitt Romney, get it. And I say, if you continue to vote for the lesser of two evils, then you are still voting for evil. You are still voting for evil. There's no super seismic distinction between Mitt Romney and Obama. There wasn't a super seismic distinction between McCain and Obama. They are both, controlled by the same entities, and they are both willing, to continue out the U.S. imperialist, quest for global domination. They both want war in Iran. They both obsequiously support, the apartheid state in Israel. And so it's really a sad state of affairs, Stephen. It really is. I mean, but those of us who are activists or who are in the know, we have no other alternative. We either quit or we continue to press on and try to expose as many people. I'm not trying to get people to think a certain way. I just want people to be exposed to the truth and to make sure that they try to use their rational minds once they are exposed to this information, and break away from just being a mass of sheeple, that are so willing to be controlled by these masses, and so. But I have no other alternative but to continue to press on and do the work that I'm doing, even if it's only getting one person a week to be exposed to information that he or she wasn't previously, because that one person may be 1,000 times more talented than I am to take this battle to a whole nother level, social justice and real revolution in terms of a social revolution that would help bring about not just domestic but worldwide peace, justice, and equality. Because as you know, Stephen, so much of what is going wrong in the world, starts from the U.S. itself, starts from the belly of the beast right here in America. It starts right here, whether it's war, whether it's, corporations, just having a rapacious appetite and just sucking up resource after resource, whether it's the World Bank, IMF. We know the World Bank and IMF are controlled by the U.S. It all starts here, and it's a country that's 5% of the world's population, but they consume more than 25% of the resources, and they produce more than 26% of the world's waste. I mean, it's completely out of whack, Stephen. And so, the rest of the world is waiting for Americans to be woken up. The rest of the world is impatiently, and rightfully so, impatiently waiting for Americans to finally demand something different than what has been provided by the two-party dictatorship in America.
Thank you very much for listening in to this episode of the Foundation for Democratic Advancement's podcast. For the FDA to continue to improve democratic processes worldwide, we rely upon your generous donations. Donate to the FDA, please visit our website at www.democracychange.org. To learn more about our mission, vision, and work, you can also visit us on Facebook and on Twitter. Thank you very much for listening, and we look forward to seeing you again next time.